to the Great Wall Display Team, which is creating the sight, sound and action of flying over the Western Front between 1914 and 1918. The 1914 BE-2C replica is the aeroplane just getting airborne and, well, theoretically at least, gaining height. Rates of climb are something which are rather different between the First World War early aeroplanes and the later ones. And if you look out across to the very south of the airfield, you'll now see a few specks appearing over the horizon. That's some of the remaining members of the Great Wall Display Team who've actually been displaying down near Southampton earlier today, and have made a 4.5-hour transit flight with a cruising speed of about 75 miles an hour in order to join the BE-2 at Duxford today. And in a few moments' time we'll be taking a closer look at those aircraft, which represent the Royal Flying Corps, the Royal Naval Air Service, the US Army Air Service and the air arm of the Imperial German Army. And we'll see a selection of biplanes, triplanes and monoplanes, which really are reproducing exactly the sight and flying characteristics of the original aircraft of the 1914 to 1918 war. And as you can see, the BE-2 now manoeuvring to join the rest of the display. We've got, as far as I can see at the moment, 7 aircraft incoming, so we'll be making it 8. And these aircraft are all flown by pilots from a range of backgrounds. Matthew Boddington flying the BE-2 as an aircraft engineer and aircraft restorer. There are also test pilots, ex-RAF pilots, airline pilots, aircraft engineers and private pilots, all with a joint passion for recreating World War I aircraft and flying skills. And in one of the 2 Fokker triplanes we'll see diving in towards us in a few moments' time, we've also got, of course, Bruce Dickinson, who's better known in some theatres as the lead singer of the rock band Iron Maiden, very much a committed aviator and a very, very enthusiastic member of the Great Wall Display Team. And as I said earlier, we're recreating the sight, sound and action of flying over the Western Front between 1914 and 1918. Ladies and gentlemen, the Great Wall Display Team.
Your king and country need you.
Well, heading the aircraft coming in, it's braking now left and right. The 2 SE-5As, 1917 fighter aircraft, followed by the 2 monoplanes, Junkers CL-1 aircraft, and the 2 triplanes, the 2 Fokker triplanes, but running in low and fast. Well, fast is advisory again with the BE-2. The BE-2C observation biplane, and braking from right to left in just a moment's time is the Sopwith triplane flown by Gordon Bradner. The aircraft now starting to climb into a position which will give you pretty much the sort of view, if you've been in the trenches of the Western Front between 1914 and 1918, of what you might have seen had you been sheltering there nearly 100 years ago.
It's a lovely war. Who would be a soldier, eh? Oh, it's a shame to take the pay. As soon as the battle's gone, it's as heavy as lead. What can we do? What we want with eggs and ham, when we're dumping as no charm. One boys, right turn, as we spend the money we have.
Well, the BE-2 there, just about outpacing the pigeon that was between us and him. Designed in 1912, was designed by Geoffrey de Havilland. It was actually the world's first purpose-designed military aeroplane. And this aeroplane was designed to be naturally stable. If you flew a Blériot or a box kite, which were the contemporaries of the BE-2, it was like flying an aeroplane standing on a beach ball. The aeroplane was dynamically unstable and needed input all the time. And the BE-2 was designed to be the first aeroplane that was sufficiently stable to allow a pilot to concentrate on other things, such as making observations of the movements of troops on the other side of the trenches, or even the other side of the hill. And that was the BE-2's role throughout, to be the eyes of the army. And that glorious, rorty exhaust note there heralds the Sopwith triplane, a design developed in 1917 following the success of the Sopwith Pup as one of the Royal Flying Corps' first scout aircraft, carrying a Vickers 303-inch machine gun, and its job, of course, was to stop the German equivalent of the BE-2 getting back to the bases with the vitally needed information. And that was how the fighter aircraft and the dogfight started, because it was the job of the scout aircraft, as they were known, to prevent the observation aircraft getting back with their information. And on the tail of the Sopwith triplane now is one of the Junkers CL-1s, one of the most heavily armoured aeroplanes of the Great War, and another one on the tail of the BE-2 as well. And you can actually see now the real disadvantage of the BE-2's stability. If you watch Matthew Boddington as he tries to turn to take avoiding action here, you can only make relatively shallow bank turns with the BE-2, otherwise it literally runs out of steam and height. And the Junkers CL-1 there has a definite advantage in manoeuvrability. And of course, when you're talking manoeuvrability, you really need to look to the Fokker triplane circling high, perhaps endeavouring to dive in on the tail of the two SE-5s, because the triplane was noted for its ability to manoeuvre hard and fast. Key part of what was being developed during the Great War came about with trench strafing, and that was really the prime role of those Junkers monoplanes, designed with a duralumin metal skinning. In actual fact, the Junkers 52 tri-motor was a 1930s aircraft that adopted exactly the same constructional principle. It used a monoplane wing, pretty advanced by aerodynamic standards at the time, two forward-facing machine guns, plus the rear gunner in the back cockpit. Now, both of these two aeroplanes, one being flown by Alex Truman, the other one by Richie Piper, are actually modified bound flybaby home-built aircraft, and they're modified into what we nicknamed the Bosch babies. And because of their light weight and relatively small engines, they are actually only classified as a single-seat aeroplane. So one of the occupants is a dummy. I'm going to leave it to you to decide which is which. Meanwhile, the two SE-5s circling overhead, and we're starting to see now the circling, twisting melee, which became known as the dogfight. And again, if you watch the BE-2C trying to carry out its observation tasks in the middle of the airfield, Fokker DR-1 is in the blind spot where Matthew Boddington, the pilot, cannot see where that DR-1 is. It's underneath his tailplane, and the DR-1 fishtailing there to lose sufficient airspeed, and there's the smoke from the BE-2 as it tries to turn, having taken a hit. Meanwhile, heading around the outside, both the SE-5As manoeuvring onto the Junkers CL-1's tails, and again trying to actually, of course, offset their attack to try and avoid the rear gunner. Closely at the SE-5A that's now running from right to left, you'll notice that the roundels appear to be the wrong way round. And that is actually because that aircraft actually represents an aircraft of the US Army Air Services. That's Vic Lockwood, a former Lightning pilot and test pilot. And this aircraft represents Blue 19 of the American 25th Aero Squadron, the only US Army's Air Services squadron that used the SE-5A over the Western Front during the Great War. And the aircraft actually went on to, a number was sold to America by the British forces at the end of the war, and in fact the aircraft was even produced in America and actually built there as it became a staple of the early days of the US military air services. And over 150 SE-5s were actually operated by the Americans as well as by the British. And diving in now at the centre of our display, going left to right, you can contrast the different styles of the two triplanes. Wonderful noise from the These aircraft powered actually by an American Warner radial engine as the two SE5s, both on the tails of the Junkers CL1s, head across the line with one Royal Flying Corps aircraft and one US Army Air Services aircraft, both on the tails of the aircraft. As you notice also carrying the later cross markings of the Imperial German Air Services. They moved actually from the Maltese cross to a planar cross just at the end of 1917. And again, tight manoeuvring by the Fokker triplane to try and get on the tail of the frantically weaving BE-2 in a sight that would have been seen over the Western Front on too many occasions. Likewise, running in now again, cloud centre, Bruce Dickinson in the second of the Fokker triplane replicas on the tail of the Sopwith triplane. And while the Sopwith triplane was actually a modification of the Sopwith Hut with the narrow and broad wings to give climb performance while still giving good pilot visibility, it's actually a very different constructional style. That one uses a wood frame fuselage and wire braced wings. And if you look closely at the Sopwith triplane as it dives in towards us again from the right, you'll see that it's got bracing wires between all the struts and the wings. If you look at the Fokker triplanes, they're cantilever wings. They actually have all their bracing internal for the less drag, and in fact the Fokker triplane, the struts between the wings actually are barely structural. They were made there more to give a confidence boost to the pilots flying the aircraft. And the two SE5s making a break away again, and above us the battle between that BE-2 and the Fokker triplane still continues. And, well, some fighter pilots actually called this turning dogfight the circle of joy. I don't think it'd be that joyful if you're in the BE-2, because that aeroplane is absolutely at the maximum bank angle that can be safely flown. And if you look closely, you'll see the rudder being used hard by that. The one at low level now, you'll see the rudder kicking across, because really that's the primary system of control of these aircraft. The ailerons were really there just to try and balance the turn. And this turning dogfight came about because actually the difference in speed between even the BE-2 and aircraft like the Fokker triplane was actually quite limited, maybe 20 miles an hour maximum between a 90 mile an hour aeroplane and a 70 miles an hour aeroplane. So it was the turning dogfight which was absolutely vital. And now you're seeing that turning dogfight demonstrated by the two triplanes, Bruce Dickinson, then Richard Piper, and then Dick Lockwood, with Dave Linney in the other SE now running in with the Junkers CL1 on his tail and having to start turning to avoid those two forward-facing stand-down machine guns. Final pass, I think, before all the aircraft here head onto the ground. We do have a very tight flying slot, so I'm sure we're going to be seeing, maybe this could be our final flying pass. You have a chance to give the crews a wave as they have flown with incredible performance. In fact, we're going to go a wave anyway, ladies and gentlemen. A great for display team. understand that we will actually have the aircraft in the air for a few moments longer. So let's just talk a bit about some of the pilots who have been flying these aircraft, as the aircraft actually will make a couple more passes before breaking off to land, and then we will have a complete change of era yet again here at Duxford, as coming down low level from left to right comes the Sopwith triplane, flown by Gordon Brander, former test pilot and senior pilot with Cobham in flight refueling, and on his tail Bruce Dickinson, who is involved in the airline mainsets, and also a huge range of other aviation activities, as well as owning this Fokker DR1 triplane replica. All these aircraft, of course, are replica airframes and will be just pausing there as I listen to some radio communications, something of course which wasn't available during the Great War, which will be indicating that in a few moments' time we will have the final pass, and we will be looking out for the aircraft forming up to give one final fly past in formation as part of the Great War display team. And also I think we ought to pay tribute to the Duxford Marshals, who are literally leaping out onto the grass over by the front of the control tower, ready to assume the role of catcher of these aeroplanes. One of the characteristics of most Great War types is that they don't have a brakes or even a tail wheel. They have a wooden tail skid. But ground handling and actually parking the aircraft is actually quite a challenge, and these aircraft are then going to need a little bit of assistance to move them into their final parking slots. So a big thank you to the hard-working marshals here at Duxford, who, as I say, will be assuming the role of catcher in just a moment. One final thought as well, as we watch those circling dogfights now resuming into a final fly past, and that is that these dogfights, of course, were affected by the prevailing wind, and that prevailing wind went from the English lines to the German lines. So every time a pilot was circling in a dogfight, the chances are they were getting closer to the German base than they were to the English one. Now I think we do actually have a chance to give one final wave here as the aircraft are setting themselves up for a final display. And leading the way comes the two SE-5As, the Royal Aircraft Factory Fighter of 1917. And behind them come the two Junkers CL-1 trench strafers, flown today by Alex Truman and Richie Piper. The two SE-5As, Vic Lockwood and Dave Linney, leading the fly past. Then come the two Junkers CL-1s. Give them a wave, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a spectacular display, as always. The two Fokker DR1 triplanes, one flown by KLM City Hopper pilot Peter Bond, the other one by Bruce Dickinson. Bruce Dickinson's one is the one with the black and white snake logo on the side of the fuselage. And then trailing a bit of smoke again comes Matthew Boddington in the 1914 B2C replica, and well, the team boss, the gaffer as he's known, Gordon Brander, at the controls of his Sopwith triplane. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed the recreation of flying 100 years ago with the Great War display team. We certainly have. Thank you very much indeed to Steve Slater and the whole of the team. A wonderful evocation of World War I in the air, as of course we mark the 100th anniversary this year of the outbreak of said conflict. B-17 Sally B taxiing past was on its way down to the right-hand end, ready to display our next but one act. We're going to recover the First World War aircraft before we get post-sea action. The change of era once again back to the Cold War. Of course, to reflect going to be joining Ron Gold Gallia's UBAR 17 Scout replica, which is already positioned on the flight line. That forming part of our